Hi, my name is Josh Burroughs. I'm a partner with Urban Catalyst. I'm here today with one of our strategic advisors, Brett Houston, CEO of Optio Development here in Silicon Valley. Brett works at the intersection of real estate and technology and has helped curate the infrastructure behind over 40 million square feet of real estate projects around the world for household names such as Facebook, Netflix, Intel, and Panasonic. Thanks for joining us, Brett.
Thank you for having me here. This is a great opportunity to get together with you guys, further talk about things that I deal with on a daily basis.
We wanted to start off just talking about what does Optio do, what was your background, and how they connected, how you connected with this crossroads of technology and real estate here in the Valley.
Yeah, it's a great question. I get all the time is how did I get here and why am I acting in such a niche market? I think the forefront is we help developers make better decisions to make sure their buildings are smart, right? And what does smart mean? Smart has evolved over the years. It used to mean telecom and potentially building management. And nowadays it's telecom, building management, smart glass, smart lighting, Wi-Fi systems, digital wayfinding, directories, I mean, you name it, right? Sensories, security, everything comes together to make a building smart. And so we help landlords, developers make that product that they're trying to develop out of the gate, have those things in mind. What typically happens is the product is developed and then all these systems get retrofitted after the warm shell is done. And so that causes issue in retrofitting those on a timely basis, the cost to do those, and the time to do those, and then you're in a scramble for what your resources to acquire those individual features. That all creates a lot of pressure that makes some of those projects fail. And so if we can get to the developer at some stage before then, we can help them better attract what we believe the marketplace needs. And so that's kind of our primary interest in the marketplace. Along the way, we have a reporting service, right? So that's part of our family of products is a reporting service to let landlords know ahead of time what does your building or potential property have in telecom capabilities, or if it's already a built environment that, say, a high-tech tenant just left. What do they leave behind that might be remarketable? Behind the scenes, we would offer advisory to that report of what we think the best and highest use of that real estate product might be. It might have been a data center and should retain it be a data center, or it could be a high-tech office or a fab that could be a data center because of the telecom components. We never know, but if we take a look at it, what the answer is will present itself, and then we kind of relay that to the developers and and part of their advisory of what the best thing to do is with that product. Lastly, we do quite a bit of work of what we call interim CIO or director level of IT consulting for all sorts of companies in the Silicon Valley. And that's a critical component because that gives us direct experience what the tenants are using for all their IT and smart resources. And quite frankly, we've been doing this across the United States and Canada. So we come in and help either unwind a project that's a problem, or like a case of Quora or Netflix that you've mentioned, or Panasonic, help them get their move-in strategy back on track, right? So between the direct tenants and then working with the developers and then the reporting service, that's basically our family of what we offer the community.
And there's a lot of complexity with tenants. They're always scrambling and they're growing, and being able to have a building that relates to what the tenant needs obviously is important from a marketing perspective. But at the end of the day, we've always felt that it's the user experience, and how do you make that experience seamless and more enjoyable for the tenant. And that's what we always saw with the value in what your team always brought to the table, and I assume that's why they keep calling you all the top tech tenants about how to strategize and make a streamless process. How do you look at future technology too? You know what the tenants want today, and how we can design those into the systems today. What do you see on the horizon, as far as the future of tech and real estate in the built environment?
Well, that's a great question. What we have seen over the last, almost 20 years doing this, starting this on my own and doing it the last 18 years, is a lot of ideas come from the CEO. And where does the CEO of that company get their ideas? They don't generally get them from the commercial market. They don't get them from what high tech or Cisco or Juniper or HP or even the app companies, they get them from consumer products, literally.
Gotcha.
Right? So what we found over the years that's really helpful is to understand what are the consumer electronics market doing that attracts people that are gadgeteers behind the scenes. And what we've realized is CEOs are gadgeteers. They may not want to promote that idea to everybody around them, but the reality is that's true. And those people experience new products and services at a much faster pace. They come back to their team and say, hey, how come we're not using this? It works great in my home, can I do it here? So IT groups, and also in some respects landlords, are trying to deal with requests that they necessarily don't understand. Certainly the engineers and architects that are developing these buildings, they don't understand that stuff. They're not gadgeteers and keeping up with that by trade, right? So if we have a mind's eye towards what the consumer market is doing now, that will become a more stable product in a few years. So that's a big part of ours, is staying up on what are things that are interesting and sexy now that will get more evolved and better stabilized to be used in an enterprise environment. So that's a big part of it. And of course the other part is understanding from high-tech IT companies, that's from hardware, that's from software, and then now the mobile apps, is understanding how do those play a role in the interaction in the building, right? How do you have an application that tell you whether your parking spot's open or not? And is that now to the point where it's fast enough versus just seeing it yourself, right? So some of these are really relying on, again, a prior project or somebody has taken the risk to try one of these things and see how it goes. So I think a lot of this is paying attention to how did these projects go? Talking to peers, talking to other companies, and continually trying to be up on how did that work out? The last thing you want to do is throw out a bunch of ideas and technologies that haven't really had a go yet or had a couple rounds, right? The first iteration of any technology, usually even from Microsoft or even Google, right? There are some pitfalls to doing that. So if you're the bleeding edge adopter, there could be pain by trying to roll it out to a 1,000-person building for Adobe, right? So I think that's what we see is the mosaic, right, of the different pieces that have to come together before we're going to suggest to a client, this is a technology or strategy. That's how our research goes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It seems like everything's about moving data and how quickly you can do it. How can we plan for that in our buildings today? Ultimately, making a better experience for the tenant and potentially saving them a lot of money over the life cycle that they are living in our buildings.
That's right.
What kind of things have you seen that or projects you've done in the past where you can plan for that data movement up front, ultimately saving the tenant money and increasing the value to the building?
That's another great question. And this is where the cross-section of 100 application software engineers working in a building and telecom come together. And I've probably mentioned this in the past to you and other people. There was a project in downtown Palo Alto for a startup company that had 5 offices in downtown, and they're spending $30,000 a month on telecom for their software engineers to communicate with each other, send code back and forth, and send it to the cloud. And that's a lot of money, and in fact, the performance of that $30,000 a month was also very slow. So we figured out a way through telecom, and basically dark fiber, to connect all the buildings together to drop that cost to, say, $5,000 a month, but at the same time, make the performance of the network and their collaboration at least 10 times faster. So if you add up all that together, it's a big number of the impact that telecom and the knowledge that what's capable or what's possible, how that affects how a company can literally do their work. And so that's one case, and we've replicated that many times for different clients, for companies like Netflix or other companies. Some of what we're offering them is strategies for alternate ways to communicate should your fiber network fail. And so I think that's some of the underpinnings of how telecom in a building can help support your average client. And of course, in today's world, right, the days of every tenant, including you guys here, having a massive server room are almost gone. And the reason why is that most of the time your servers and your applications, they're in the cloud. And what does that mean? They're in a data center somewhere. How do you get to the data center? Well, you need an internet circuit or multiple internet circuits to get there. So
Right.
then the question becomes, if you don't have a fast internet circuit or reliable internet circuit, a large part of your applications, which is data interexchange, right? They're not going to work well. So what happens is the strategy for getting good internet access and how to potentially mesh your internet access, so if one fails, another one keeps going, that becomes more of a story that people need to solve
Right.
so they can continue to just do their work. And that's, I think, the most practical way to explain, how does telecom and building networks, how does that affect a tenant today?
Right.
Yeah.
You and I had spoken about, and it's one of the things we tout, is that downtown San Jose has infrastructure, and we have the largest redevelopment agency in the state, and we put in a lot of underground resources that have really been untapped to date. Maybe you can expand a little bit on what you were talking about, the fiber that we do have downtown, and as we see tech tenants moving southward into the downtown market, we were projecting that there could be a big increase based on the infrastructure we have here today. Just needs to be coordinated, I think, is what you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And San Jose is an interesting municipality or city that has a tremendous amount of its own fiber optics network for a variety of reasons. I mean, the city has its business of managing traffic, it needs to communicate with different offices, and it has its own public Wi-Fi, it has smart meters for
Right.
managing cars, and all that is a large infrastructure that at this moment isn't really put to its best and highest use for commerce outside of the own city business. And it's one of the things I've mentioned to you in the past, that I feel it's an underutilized component of what they own that we feel they could easily lease out like a utility to tenants of your buildings, or for that matter, for developers like you want to take a chance, make sure a building has fiber access, dark fiber access to the internet. That's a powerful resource. Cities like Santa Clara and Palo Alto get it, and they started doing this years ago. So it's no surprise Santa Clara uses dark fiber, and the tenants and the data centers, they use it just like they need garbage, water, and power, right? So that we think that's the next way the city of San Jose should be adopting to help developers like you get buildings be connected to reduce impediments for small and large tenants to connect to their cloud applications.
Right.
It reduces the pressure on power to a building. If you can offload your servers and this heavy power cooling intensive equipment to a data center where it's more reliable, that's better for everybody, right? And the best way to do that, it's fiber. The best way to adopt fiber is dark fiber. And then the question is, okay, well, what does dark fiber mean? Like, what does that mean when someone says dark fiber? Well, what it means is the fiber that usually you're paying for, it comes from companies that we've all heard of: AT&T, Verizon,
Comcast.
Sprint, Comcast, and lesser known ones called Zayo and Level 3 and Time Warner and CenturyLink, right? And all those companies are in the business to sell you an internet circuit or a circuit to somewhere
Right.
on fiber for a monthly fee, and they manage routers and lasers and all these things to make sure it stays stable. Dark fiber is different. It's literally fiber optic glass strands that go into your building, connect to your equipment at the speed you determine, and then you determine where it goes. Well, if you're smart, you drop it off at a data center that has a lot of internet access, and then the cost of your internet circuit goes down, the speed options go up, and then what's also interesting is when you get to a data center, you now have your choice of all those companies I mentioned, but at a reduced cost, right? Because at the data center, that's the least cost per megabit that's possible, right? Because there's 0 miles involved in maintaining the infrastructure. That's the point source of where the internet is created. And so when you're doing dark fiber that way, you're getting the best pricing, getting the best reliability, you get the best possible speeds, and when you become an exotic company, you mesh all these together, you create a very resilient network, allows you to do your business where otherwise it's very challenging.
Are these the relay points you were talking about? And you mentioned that we have a lot of those already in the downtown core
That's
of
right.
San Jose.
That's right. We call them peering points.
Peering points.
Right. And so peering is really, in essence, what the internet is all about. The very first internet node was nothing other than a couple telecom circuits going into a location that they swap information like a switch.
Got it.
And then when you scale that up to 10, 20, 30 network carriers, they're just passing traffic to each other, right? And so whenever you have a data center that has a lot of carriers that are passing traffic to each other, that is in essence what the internet is. At its root core, the internet is peering. Much in the same way if you have, I-5, meshing with the major freeways across California. At every point where I-5 itself has a connector to another major freeway, let's say that on-ramp, off-ramp system is in essence a peering point, right? It's where someone traveling one direction can go to another direction, right? And that's in essence what an internet peering point is. And then back to your other point is that San Jose actually has quite a few peering points, data centers. In fact, the building we're in right now is a peering point that people don't know about.
Okay.
And there's a couple others within a half mile of here. So San Jose itself has adequate peering points that are relevant to take companies like Adobe, like Google in the future, right?
Right.
And other high-tech companies down here. It has enough.
Our neighbors at Zoom just went IPO and they're expanding.
Exactly, and I would be surprised if they're not using dark fiber to get to a peering point literally in this building to get out to the internet. If they aren't, then we need to help them pretty quickly. Right? That would be a no-brainer. Yeah, so that's what the whole peering relationship is.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So Google's moving into town.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be our new neighbor to the west here, of the downtown core. How do you think that's going to change downtown? And I know you went to San Jose State.
Yep.
You're a native here, and bringing their technology and some of their ideas as well. They're also bringing some infrastructure with them.
Yes.
Curious on your thoughts.
It's hard to see a downside from a technology perspective for Google coming in. I mean, putting traffic aside, putting bodies aside, sticking to technology, behind the scenes, Google, they're the nerds of nerds, right? All the projects they work on are from a science and an IT and information exchange. They're at the hardcore of it, right? And to support that, they're smart enough to create their own network or their own dark fiber network, like the major carriers. So wherever they build and expand, they're putting in that infrastructure. And Google has always, well, for a very long time, wanted to get into metro markets to offer smart cities, and San Jose, and there's been dozens of municipalities they've looked to do it over the years. They've also found out it's really difficult to do, right?
Yeah.
Most cities they've planned to expand to, they've actually pulled back. Just the cost and complexity of doing it's a daunting task. It's a very expensive and time consuming. So fast forward to them building their own headquarters, it's going to be guaranteed they're going to be improving the fiber infrastructure in San Jose, right? And it won't be just their campus. To get to the campus, they will have to get there. And in that process, they're going to start to enable their services to get to other places besides their campus. That's my belief, right? So the trickle down, it's like a Formula One car, right? Formula One car technology, how does it benefit the average car? Well, once you get it done, it's easy to commute that technology to nearby technologies. So I feel like Google's campus will do that for telecom, but there's going to be other ways that Google's technologies will benefit nearby businesses. Google does hire local talent, right? So while they might use marketing companies across the world when it comes to things like IT resources and data centers and people and local things like the Nests and smart cameras and smart locks and smart security systems and smart conference rooms, all those technologies will come to bear in their campus, but we feel that a better understanding of San Jose businesses nearby of what Google's doing will allow them to keep an eye on what Google's doing, adopt those technologies, because Google likes to be frugal in their own technology adoption. Things like Hangouts, right?
Right.
So does everybody understand how to maximize using Hangouts or Google Drive or the other technologies? We feel like just the haze of Google in downtown will benefit other companies, even schools, even the city government. We feel could be looking at Google on how to have services that scale, are reliable and relevant.
Where do you see downtown San Jose 10 years from now?
Wow. Yeah, so 10 years from now is, gosh, in internet years, that's 70 years out in the future, right? And in probably 3 years, Google will have some footprint here that will change the landscape. Right now, we don't know, right? I think your company is one of the companies in the forefront of investing in real estate for the future, that for the types of tenants, and bringing true Silicon Valley startups that might more be associated with Mountain View, Palo Alto, places like Sunnyvale. They're going to want to be coming this direction. The question is there a market niche that comes in? Or is it merely the kinds of companies that want to service Google? Or does Adobe explode? So I think it's hard to tell how the composition will be. Will it be huge companies, each taking a building at a time? Or will it be a mix of big companies deciding to come down because now the talent pool is here, but also the incubation of ideas? My suspicion is it's a mix of both, right? You'll have far more startups coming out of San Jose downtown because you have lots of engineers and bright people, maybe working for a big company to start, getting an idea that's not taken by the big company and they want to spin out, right? So, co-working spaces and hoteling spaces and satellite offices, I think that's a bit, right. Yeah. And you see this and we see this, and I think that's a business model that'll expand. I would suspect most multi-tenant office buildings will have that component in all of them, right? And that in itself will breed more companies with more ideas. And in some sense, right, that makes it easier for people outside of the area, international companies, countries that want to sponsor innovation. It'll be easier for them to bring modules of people down here. So I think it's fascinating to find out what's going to happen in 10 years. I have no idea what it's really going to look like, but obviously the signs are it's the time where San Jose could be literally in the biggest expansion of downtown San Jose as far as real business and potentially a real community that lives here, right? So I think that's what you guys are hoping to help accomplish.
And for all ages.
That's right, and I think that would be the anchor for downtown San Jose. If it can get the housing and the people to live down here and nearby here in buildings that are also smart, that would create a nexus that would make it last.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why we're looking at everything from student housing for San Jose State to senior housing. We're looking at co-living, market rate apartments, multi-tenant office buildings, places for small business to grow, incubators to operate out of, co-working spaces to thrive. And our goal when we talk about the future of the built environment, at least with our fund, and our 10 project goal, is that the projects can communicate with each other. It's like a mini community within the bigger community, and hopefully that sparks that conversation with our other developer friends downtown. How can we create a better user experience for everybody who works and lives here downtown? I think that starts with apps and infrastructure and communication systems, transportation, and how do we make this ultimately a higher quality of life here? So that's what we're looking to do.
And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's how you'd want it, a community that can work together through co-competition, right?
Right.
But co-benefit, right? So the things that you just mentioned are possible today. They'll even get better, right? To be able to have apps on someone's phone that understands the traffic patterns or what kind of events are happening. So it doesn't happen to just be one building, it'd be all the community members can know what's going on. And that really only can happen when things like the building network, the tenants network, the mobile network, wireless, right? When all that is converged and cooperating with each other, those things are easy to happen, right? It's tougher when you've got a whole building that can't get, good broadband services for the average tenant or the average homeowner. That makes it tougher for them to be up to speed and, exercise their data plan and blow up their mobile minutes. I mean, so if you can get beyond those things, I think the sky's the limit.
I have a future question for you. You're a big car guy, big racer, professional, and what do you think the future of the car is, at least in an urban environment? We have lots of electric vehicles. We have lots of scooter options downtown. We're looking at incorporating a lot more transportation nodes for buses and public transportation increases. Do you think we're going to be designing parking garages 10 years from now?
I think it will be. I think the car isn't going away, but on the same token, how the car operates will obviously change. I mean, the end state is somewhat obvious to me that in the future, you're not going to be hopping in your car and then just driving somewhere and then you get to dictate what speed you're going. Your car is going to be connected to a network of systems that smooths out traffic so you're getting to your destination in the most possible time with less braking, less traffic congestion. So that seems to be the way. Whether or not you're driving the car or the car has no person driving capable, it's going to be connected to a network. I think that's probably the biggest thing that we think is a no-brainer, right? It's just a matter of time for every car that's on the road is connected to a network system, so it's smoothing out traffic. And the same token, that's structure, right? That's a structured transportation through automotive. But on the same token, it's going to take a little while to get there. So things like scooters, those are unstructured, right? Those are just like bees and ants flying through downtown, and it seems chaotic, but that allows to offload a lot of the cars, right? So, yeah. I mean, you might see parking garages, but they might be bikes and scooters and other electric vehicles, right? As the cities are struggling with how many scooters can I have in a corner, right? On the same token, you and I just want to walk out the building, get onto some kind of transportation and go somewhere, right? So I think the unstructured and ad hoc transportation like scooters and bikes, those need to proliferate too. There are going to be some issues, but I think we need to go through the issues, right?
Right.
Until all the cars are working on a network, that's going to have to continue as well. And then hopefully along the way, we learn a few things that not everybody needs to be transported in a big bus or in a car, right? So things like scooters, those eventually, can be also guided, and there's lots of technologies to create motorcycles and bikes that are, stable, and so, they're not falling over. All that's coming. Yeah.
I like it. Let's see, my last question's on economics. Building technologies, and maybe you can talk about a case study or a project in the past, but my gut is that, planning for the future today, you can both, receive a higher value for your project, which means a higher user experience for the user, and also save money for the user at the same time. And you can talk about sort of the win-wins you've seen in the past on both the landlord and the tenant side.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to the beginning of our conversation that when you're adding, and traditionally, when you're adding technology to a building, it's after the warm shell or cold shell is complete. So you're doing things like adding card access systems and camera systems and Wi-Fi systems and digital directories and smart building sensors, and all these things have been traditionally added after the fact. And so the question is, how expensive is that? And how much time does that take? And I think through a variety of projects that we've done in the Silicon Valley, just in the last 3-4 years, which is literally dozens of campuses,
right.
I think what we see is the cost is 3 times the cost. So let's just say...
If you do it later.
If you do it later, yeah. So to retrofit these technologies after the fact, it's not just the cost of the part, right? Parts, whether it's a card reader or a camera or Wi-Fi or a lobby system, those... So let's say something costs $10,000 to add in. It's going to cost at least $30,000 to do it after the fact. So I think that's the big selling feature for developers is if it's part of the building operations that's going to survive in a multi-tenant environment, it becomes much easier to justify spending the money up front, right? So if you were going to spend, say, $500,000 on all these smart systems, you could cut that number down dramatically by doing it ahead of time. But that requires coordination with the architect and the people who design all the conduit and cable conveyance,
right.
And that's kind of where things reside, is the guts of the planning of the building.
The stuff you don't see.
The stuff you don't see is expensive to retrofit after the fact. And then the benefit for tenants is a developer that took the risk to spend a little more money up front can hand off to the tenant a suite or floor or a building that's been better prepared to get going quickly, right? And we see this all the time.
Everything's about time.
It is about time, and we've seen this over the years where, let's say a tenant finishes their TI and they get 3 weeks to commission and burn everything through. Well, those 3 weeks have been collapsed to 2 days, right? So the systems for the furniture rolling in and the AV and the Wi-Fi and the networks, all that hits earlier now, right? And so the compression of time is money has made it really easier to understand that waiting to do all these things after the fact is costly in time, costly in money, and is prone to mistakes, right? So not being at the table with the designers of the building makes it also difficult just to plan to retrofit, right? It's like remodeling a house. When you come in without any knowledge of how it was built and you want to change all these things, well, it's almost harder to do that than it is to just tear down the house and build it from the way up the way you want to.
Right.
Right?
What are we finding behind door number 1?
That's exactly right. So I think that's probably the best way to describe that. And so for, I think, the last several projects we've done, that's worked out very well for everybody involved.
Thank you, Brett.
You're
for coming.
welcome. It was a
Always
pleasure
good
to come
see
down. You know me, I love talking this stuff all day long.
Love talking shop with you.
Absolutely.